evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. As you probably know, this is an event that we were going to do about a month ago, and a lot of the things that this book is involved with kind of blew up in that week, and so we had to postpone. So we're here tonight and very glad to be here. I'm Jonathan Welch from Talking Leaves. I want to thank Christen and her publisher for letting us do this. And I want to thank Hallwalls, as always, for partnering with us and letting us use their space. I should say this event, as all our events, are free, but if you are interested and inclined, on the way in, there's a little device that you can punch and make a donation to Hallwalls, and we encourage people to do that so that we can keep doing these kinds of events. Thank you for that. We always start with an acknowledgement, land acknowledgement, which I think is particularly important tonight when we're talking about the devastation that has happened to the land of the indigenous folks here over the past 4 or 5 centuries. We acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands of the Six Nations, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Though various treaties removed Native peoples to clear the way for colonial settlement, the Haudenosaunee have lived on and stewarded these lands for centuries and continue to do so today. Hallwalls and Talking Leaves express our gratitude to the Six Nations people upon whose traditional lands we reside and work. We commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the indigenous people of this land and beyond. And I would say that we also commit ourselves to trying to do a better job than our ancestors did of taking care of the land and the people on it, and the creatures as well. Julia is going to introduce Christen, who's going to give you lots of information and history and updates on what's going on. Copies of the book are for sale at some point, and she'll sign them afterwards, and I'm sure she's got all sorts of stuff for you to look at afterwards too, so please stick around after the presentation. Again, thank you all for coming. Here's Julia.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Jonathan's been here since the book started launched and has been supporting Christen this whole time, so we're very grateful for your presence and time. Second, I wanted to thank you all for coming and supporting this book and its cause. This has been a one-woman show for far too long, and the only way that this is going to garner attention and awareness is through community support, word of mouth, and it's been growing into something that the government and our communities can't ignore. Before I introduce our guest of honor and the reason this event is happening, allow me to please briefly introduce myself. My name is Julia Rose. I'm a local attorney and writer myself, but I'm here because I have a more unique connection to the author, as this is my mother and the biggest supporter of my entire life. And the person I look up to most, in no small part due to the information and the things that you're going to hear about today. She has been my biggest supporter since I've been on this planet, and it has been an honor to be able to give back even a fraction of that support, encouragement, and motivation as she charges forward in this movement. She's actually the reason I went to law school. I love to think that it came as a choice all on my own, but I was influenced. I was influenced by her dedication, her knowledge, her capabilities, and her drive to dig deep, whether that's uncovering long-lost chemical reports that don't exist, or in her vulnerability in her personal relationships. It doesn't matter, everything gets a due diligence and care, and I've always admired that. One more thing about her, she does not back down, ever. And from personal experience growing up as a teenager in her home. When she was told that these reports didn't exist, or certain wastelands were cleaned up, or told to take their word for it, or threatened by billion-dollar corporations to mind her own business, she made it her business to make sure that the truth came to light and that those in power were held accountable for the absolute havoc that they have wreaked over a once gorgeous but still magnificent corner of the world. Her professional background is tailored to this moment. After practicing as an intellectual property lawyer in Georgia for many years, she relocated our family to New York, where she started taking on independent cases and teaching alternative dispute resolution and eventually wildlife and biodiversity in the law at a local university. She's always been a writer. She wrote a number of nonfiction legal books. She has environmental blogs, and her first fiction novel, Green City Savior, that came out 11 years ago. How she found the time between day-to-day lawyering and 4 kids, I will never know. She still serves as a mediator and a professor to this day. She also launched a successful podcast, BOOKSTORM, that I've been lucky enough to co-host with her for the past couple of years. And if that wasn't enough, she's channeled her extra energy into these beautiful paintings of her muse, and I hope you enjoy her talents as much as I have. Somewhere in all that law, all those books, and all of that chaotic life lived, she set her sights on justice for Niagara Falls. I mentioned earlier that this is a movement, and it is. This is not the type of story that gets left on the page. Rather, Thundering Waters is a call to action. She has been gathering data, researching, interviewing members of the community, and litigating related matters for 20 years. There is no one better suited to bring these wrongdoings to light, and she does it so elegantly, so intriguingly, and so selflessly. And I hope this doesn't come across as biased. I have read thousands of books in my lifetime, and this one really does stand out. This book is a window into the underworld of geopolitics, industrialization, and corruption that's gone down and continues to go down to this day in Niagara Falls. Ultimately, it's an expose written from the heart and the brilliant mind of a woman who's lived it. Please join me in welcoming the author of Thundering Waters, Christen Civiletto.
A little choked up. It was so beautiful. Thank you, Julia. Before we get started, I know that Bridge from the Clean Air Coalition just wanted to say a few words, and then we'll jump right into it and dive in.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Christen. Just very briefly, Clean Air. We have a number. If you're not familiar with us, we work on environmental justice organizing campaigns. Town Coke is the one we're most well known for. We've been working to support some of the residents as they're starting to get their organized legs underneath them. And I just want to share, we have an event this coming Saturday. It's a series of site visits as well as town halls with Senator Christen Gonzalez. She's the lead sponsor of the Responsible Data Centers Act. That's the data center moratorium bill that the Senate and the Assembly passed that led to the governor's executive order. We're still trying to get that bill across the finish line. We're going to have town halls in Buffalo and Niagara Falls, and we're putting those this issue of data centers within the context of all of this. So we actually have one of the homeowners who's going to be on the panel for the Niagara Falls event. And we're one of the reasons we're taking her on this tour is we want to show her that as bad as these data centers are, it's also, there's a data center next to the Goodyear plant. There's a data center next to the Covanto Rerolled incinerator. So these are already environmentally justice burdened communities, and these new data centers are adding to that burden. And I did hear a couple people asking, do these data centers, there are a few data centers that are operating within the city of Buffalo, within Niagara Falls, a couple others throughout the region. And it's 2 gigawatts of projects in the queue right now. So this is the new industrial frontier. It's being used to further deregulate our existing skeletal regulatory structures. So I handed out some flyers to most of the folks in here. I saw a couple of new folks come in, so if you just want to raise your hands. I've got just a couple left. So.
Thank you, Bridge.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming out tonight. I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for all the feedback I'm getting on the book. I get all kinds of text messages and emails, and a lot of the stories I hear are very similar. I keep hearing things like, finally I have some answers. We have no idea what has happened to us. We didn't know it was this bad. And so I want to kind of dive into a little bit about how this book came about, because that was me a few years ago as well. I was born and raised in Niagara Falls, and it is a wonderful place from many, many respects. I loved being around my family. I could walk to my grandma's house. My cousins were next door. All kinds of wonderful aspects of that incredible city. But I also was one of those kids who was like, I can't wait to leave Niagara Falls and go to a big city, and I'm never coming back. So I did that. I went to school in law school in Nashville, and then I began my practice in Atlanta. And as Julia mentioned, I was an intellectual property lawyer. I thought everything was set, everything was fine. But I kept hearing back home about people who were getting sick. And that was kind of normal to me. I'd grown up with a lot of toxic talk. Cancer, this person's sick, that person. So it wasn't that unusual to me. But a friend of mine pointed out that you seem to know a lot of people back home, Niagara Falls, who are sick. And we don't have that level of illness here in Atlanta. In fact, I was at a large firm, 130 attorneys. I didn't know anybody with cancer. None of my friends in my friend group had cancer. But then I got diagnosed with cancer at 31 years old. And I remember my doctor saying to me, this is not sun-related, it was melanoma, very unusual for that age. And I didn't have any risk factors. So it kind of, a little light bulb kind of started going off in my mind, like that is kind of odd. My father then was diagnosed with an exceedingly rare cancer. It was linked to ionizing radiation. Now, when I found that out, I thought to myself, I have no idea where my dad would have been exposed to ionizing radiation. So I kind of pondered these things for quite a bit. I went to my 10-year high school reunion. I was a little shocked. There were a lot of people who were missing. We're only 10 years out of high school. A lot of other people, there were 5 people with MS. And again, those are numbers that are not explained by normal statistics. So all these things were kind of running around in my mind. I eventually had to move back to the area, moved back to Niagara County, and a little bit kicking and screaming. And I was a little surprised at what I saw. The city was in very bad condition, Niagara Falls. You know, I'd been back for holidays and visiting with people, of course, but when I came back to live there, I really started noticing some of the differences that I wasn't seeing in Atlanta or Nashville. And again, I kept hearing about people being diagnosed with rare illnesses. So when my dad was diagnosed with a soft tissue spindle sarcoma, I really started to dig in. Now, this was 23 years ago when I really started looking at the research and familiarizing myself with things. And a few years into that research, I found a list, and it had 89 hazardous waste sites on it. And that's in Niagara Falls, which is 15 square miles. Now, I knew about Love Canal. Many of you may know about Hyde Park Bloody Run. But I was a little stunned when I saw 89 hazardous waste sites. In fact, my actual list that I printed out with the date on it is in one of these grids where I clipped a few things that you can take a look at. And you'll see my list of 89. I started at the top, and I dug in, and I looked for documents. And it was, you know, kind of pre a lot of things on the internet. I'm not going to say how old I am exactly, but but I started collecting information, and a bigger picture started to emerge. It was a little sinister looking. I wasn't understanding how I kept seeing some of the same names crop up over and over. Not just the Occidentals and the DuPonts, and we're going to certainly talk about them. But I started to see people who were engaged in toxic trafficking. They were moving a lot of waste around Niagara County. In fact, I'm going to show you on another graphic. We started tracking where that waste was moving to and from. Well, it's a little bit surprising. So I dove in, and I was very shocked to learn that my dad worked at Carborundum. I didn't know that, but that was one of the ways he put himself through school. And as it turns out, many of Niagara Falls' factories converted some of their operations over to work on the Manhattan Project. And that's where the radioactivity exposure came for a lot of people. But I learned something else. I didn't know that Niagara Falls was the birthplace of the chlor-alkali industry. It was an entire chemical industry that was actually born in Niagara Falls. And that was a little bit of a surprise to me as well. I knew that we grew up with these factories. I remember seeing pollution all the time and smelling horrible things. But to understand what Niagara Falls' role was historically was something that I really didn't have a good grasp on. In fact, what I learned is that with the advent of electricity, we had manufacturers who decided to anchor themselves here and start their businesses here. Carborundum, Union Carbide, I could go on and on. In fact, I have a list from the 1950s you'll see on one of the grids where there were dozens upon dozens upon dozens of these manufacturers that decided to set up shop here. Now, a lot of people always say, well, why were they coming here? Well, the obvious reason is because of electricity. It was cheaply available. They were diverting water from the upper Niagara River. And back in the 1870s, the hydraulic canal came online. And many of you may recognize the name Sholkoff, very famous in Buffalo. This was a very successful businessman. But around 1877, he bought the canal from everybody who went bankrupt before him, trying to make a go of it. He was a very smart businessman, and he widened it and started inviting manufacturers from all over, what was then the United States, to come to Niagara Falls and set up their businesses. And that's what they did. Not only did they have this hydraulic canal that was diverting water from the upper river, it was running and turning their wheels, it was turning belts and machinery, but there were a few other things that were going on with that water. They were using it eventually to cool processes, to do all kinds of, mill-related things, but much more. What was interesting is that in around 1896, inventors started using electricity for purposes no one thought of before. Sure, we were turning on lights. We were starting to electrify things. But they started to use electricity to get high heats in furnaces and to use it to transform chemicals, to shake them up and to take apart chemicals, but also to do other ways of transforming chemicals into new chemicals. All of a sudden, chemicals that didn't exist in nature started to become possible. And these were very powerful chemicals. So for example, we have abundant salt near Buffalo. We have these incredible salt domes. So these companies said, well, not only do we have water, electricity, and now we have salt that's really cheap, but let's start isolating chlorine. And chlorine can be used for a host of all kinds of products, from disinfectants to pesticides. And that's what happened. We started having these inventions of new chemicals. And as wars came along, especially World War I, which is known as the Chemist War, we now had an explosion of these use of these chemicals, not just for pesticide purposes, but for plasticizers, rubbers, for all kinds of products that were now being developed and used all over the world. And this was anchored here in Niagara Falls. Now, as subsequent wars came along, World War II, after World War II ended, of course we had Korean War and Vietnam. Well, Niagara Falls became essential to many of the products and the pesticides and the chemicals that were used in those wars. And so these factories had unlimited potential. So now we had the salt, the water, the cooling processes. We also had something else that a lot of other places didn't. We had a tremendously ready-to-work population, largely of immigrants and Black migrants from the South. And that was, I think, one of the things that really drew many different chemical manufacturers here. Because we had a workforce who may not have been necessarily highly educated, but they were very willing to, out of a patriotic sense of duty, get to work. And I learned that my great-grandfather worked at Carborundum for 44 years. My grandfather, who really wanted to be a forest ranger, he got a job from his dad, and you take that job when you're offered it. He worked 46 years at Carborundum. When it was my dad's turn, he really bucked against the system. He wanted to go to college. He wanted to actually be a lawyer, and didn't get into law school, so became a teacher, which he was born and bred to do. And my dad put in about 7 years getting himself through school and graduate school. I didn't know at the time, but my grandfather and my dad were highly exposed to plutonium and uranium. They were both in the R&D building, and my grandfather was able to recover as an atomic worker, but my father was not. His percentage was just below what they would consider actionable. Ridiculous. But what I learned is that lots of families in Niagara Falls had a similar experience, where their ancestors, their great-grandparents, grandparents, really coveted those jobs in the factories because they put food on the table. They were paid a decent wage. The problem, of course, is that they had no idea they were being exposed to not just radiation, but also very serious chemicals. Now, the important part of the story, and this is kind of where a little bit of this book comes in, of course, is that when you are making all of these chemicals, when you are refining uranium, there's leftover waste. And that leftover waste is generally pretty concentrated, very toxic, and it has to go somewhere. Now, I want to give you an idea of the scale of what was going on in Niagara Falls at the time. We are talking about millions of tons of waste being generated by many factories. And I'm going to show you some pictures of where this waste has gone, because I've mapped it out. But I want to tell you first that there was this idea that anywhere was fair game for dumping this waste. And it was very intentional. Not only was it the Niagara River, in fact, you're going to see a picture when you first walk in of a particular dump site called the 102nd Street dump. It was a beast. Up to 159,000 tons of hazardous waste was dumped at surface. And anybody seeing the picture will guess why it was at surface. The Niagara River was adjacent to the property. They were allowing it just to wash into the river. And of course, when it goes over the falls and moves on down gradient to Lake Ontario, where all of us, and maybe some of you played as kids at Fort Niagara, we had a lot of waste that was being disposed of in that way. It wasn't just being dumped into the river. It was also being dumped into sewers. And sewering became a verb. And it was very convenient because the sewers led to the Niagara River, both the upper and the lower. In addition, these factories decided that some of their waste should go into farmers' fields. They paid them, sometimes just a little money, sometimes a lot of money, to eliminate some of this waste problem that they had. It didn't stop there. They looked for empty canals, hence Love Canal. They looked for anywhere and anywhere with an open patch of land that they could start dumping. Creeks, waterways, you name it. Now, we know of many of these sites now. In fact, if you look at the graphic here, every one of those circles represents a hazardous waste site. It is a little shocking what has happened to Niagara County. This is Niagara County. You can see over there in Lockport, we've got kind of a constellation there, up in Lewiston. And then of course, this is what I call the big impact zone, because this is where we've got 89 plus. We have 255 sites throughout Niagara County itself. We're counting to this day. In fact, I put a little note where a notice was just put out about 2020 River Road, a new dump site. We are still discovering them. And if you saw the news today, unfortunately, we've got these radioactive hotspots now that have not just started in the town of Niagara, they are spreading to various other places. And today we saw they're going to, Aurora, Marilla, and 4 other towns. That's what happened to Western New York. We had a waste problem, and they figured out where to put it. A whole cottage industry sprung up. We have these toxic traffickers, and there was a handful of them. There's one named Big Lou, and he considered himself the godfather of hazardous waste. And if you read the book, and you may have already, he wasn't an engineer. I don't think this guy had any idea what he was doing, but he bragged to people that his waste sites would last 1,500 years and they would never migrate. Most of his sites didn't make it to, and they began polluting the Niagara River and any of the land around where they were located. In fact, one of his waste sites that he was associated with is Mount Seacos, the giant eyesore that you are greeted with when you come into Niagara Falls. So we've got these families and these toxic traffickers who became very powerful, working hand in hand with these chemical companies in Niagara Falls. And what I started to notice is that over time, they infiltrated politics. They became, people who sat on the boards of universities. There was no accountability because everywhere you turn, they've got a seat at the table. I remember when I was young that people used to revere the executives who worked at a chemical company. I remember this very distinctly. You knew who the executives were. They were quoted in the paper. Socially, they were very important. They went to the country club. That's the power and the hold that these companies had on Western New York, in particular in Niagara County. Now, from my standpoint, I started assembling this information together, and I was a little bit shocked again because it was something that I had not understood before. I knew about Love Canal. I grew up right on the outskirts at Cayuga Creek. I know many of my friends and family who lived in Love Canal. I remember being shuffled around because of all the moving of schools that had to happen. I rode my bike pretty regularly into Love Canal and turned around at Griffin Manor. That was normal to me. So to me, that was, something that I remember happening, not knowing it was a worldwide event. But what I didn't know is that everywhere that I went to school, that I lived, that I worked, and that I played was contaminated. It was either in the crosshairs of 3 Superfund sites or it was contaminated itself. I went to Prince of Peace for elementary school, radioactive parking lot. I went to LaSalle Senior High School. When they knocked it down, there was waste that had to be remediated before the Walmart could be built, heavily contaminated. Not to mention the air pollution, of course. I could go on and on. I think that's probably why I had cancer on the back of my leg, because I used to spend a lot of my time in Cayuga Creek. No one told us it was contaminated with dioxins, PCBs, Murex. Those are things that are still plaguing the creek to this day, but it was surprising to me. No one ever told us it was that bad. So I decided to start processing what I was learning through writing. So this was a long time ago. It was like 2011, and I'm putting thoughts down. And one day I get a call from a family, and they said, "We heard you're a chemical researcher," which I had to laugh because I am not a chemical researcher. They didn't know I was an attorney. And this family said, "We have a child who is severely birth defected. He has something only 40 people in the entire world have." 40 people. It was a mosaic trisomy 5P. I never even heard of it. But they also learned that they were 900 feet from Love Canal. They thought it was a place where teenagers went. They were from out of town. They didn't know. And they knew something else. That child, who had a 1% chance of survival, was the result of a post-conception harm, which means the parents weren't the carriers of his chromosomal abnormality. Now my ears perked up. Then I told them I was a lawyer, right? I went and visited this family. We did some testing. I noticed right away there were some really bad smells in their house, chemical smells. And at that point, I started talking to their neighbors, 3 families. Then all of a sudden it was 10 families. Pretty soon, I was working with 1,500 families. And over time, I've interviewed more than 2,200 families overall between all this stuff that's gone on in the past years. But what I realized is that there were some pretty significant levels of illness, and litigation was born out of that meeting. And I won't bore you with the details. I do have a chapter that addresses this lawsuit that was brought. But suffice it to say that we litigated against the chemical companies for 14 years until a judge dismissed it on a technicality. And so this book is because a lot of those pictures, a lot of what I learned has never come out before, and now it's time. So if we're not going to be in litigation anymore, now it's time for you to see what it is that we were working on for 14 years. And that's what some of these pictures are. So I'll talk about these in just a second, but I want to tell you what happened after that. So I started working on that Love Canal litigation. We alleged that that liner has failed. And I want to tell you why. There's a lot of reasons why, but this is the primary one. That liner was supposed to last at Love Canal for 20 years max. It's 40 mil, which is a thick credit card. Mil is a measurement of plastic sheeting. And that is not a lot of things standing between you and a lot of chemicals, right? There's 21,800 tons of chemicals there. That liner is in year 42. And I'm pretty sure that I've got parts of that liner in a couple spots, including my clients' homes. So that's why it's time now for all this to come out. So I'm going to fast forward just a little bit. I started working on this book in earnest. It was time. I put it aside when I was litigating and doing all the things with that. And now I have a bigger picture perspective. After interviewing all these families, what I've concluded is that we were done wrong. And I do believe the world needs to hear what happened to Niagara Falls for a couple reasons. We can't repeat this anywhere else. You know, these chemical companies mostly left town, not all, but they're doing the same kind of thing in China and India and Mexico, right? We've got harms occurring because these are really serious wastes that come out of these factories. But also because there needs to be some accountability. We've got a number of people who made really bad decisions. In fact, I could identify a list. And companies are still in existence today who really harmed people in Niagara Falls. So from my perspective, there's some accountability aspect to what's going on here. And that's something I address pretty directly in the book towards the end. But also, I wanted to provide some answers to people. Because after interviewing, by now it's probably more than 2,200 families, but at least that, what I've realized is that people are being told over and over again that they're medical mysteries. The doctors can't explain why they're sick. And here's the important thing. We have a lot of people who are 90 in Niagara Falls. It's not that generation that was impacted. It's the 50s and the 60s. I just went to my high school reunion this weekend, 40. So from 10, when a lot of people were sick, to 40. We've lost a good percentage of our class. There were 27 people alone who weren't there, mostly because of cancer. What I saw when I was there was cancer, cancer, cancer. And it was shocking to me. I didn't recognize certain people. That's why I wanted to write this book, because we deserve some answers, we deserve some accountability, and frankly, at the end of this book, I'm going to call for some reparations for Niagara Falls and Niagara County, because I do believe it's time for generational change. We shouldn't be here 20 years from now wondering why people are so sick. We know why people are so sick. So now it's time to address it. And again, not to dwell on all kinds of negative things. I promise I'm going to talk about something positive. But Niagara County has a problem. We are number 2 in New York State for cancer, all malignancies for men and women. We were number 1 and we're number 2 only by 1 point. But we also are at the top of the heap when it comes to stroke, cardiovascular harm, MS, thyroid disease. That shouldn't be the case. Niagara County's suicide rate is nearly double that of New York State. And I believe it's because of this widespread community exposure to these neurotoxins. So we need to do better. We need some accountability. We need to fix the problem. And I'm really gratified, and here's my positive note. All of a sudden, there has been this environmental awakening happening in Niagara Falls. I'm thrilled. I wish it was 23 years ago, but it's happening now, and we're going to run with it. And as many of you probably know, we've got 6 emerging issues coming out of Niagara Falls. We've got the radiation hotspots that are dominating the headlines right now, and that's good. We're going to get that out. We're going to address those problems. We have a love canal issue. This is no surprise to me. We litigated for 14 years, and all these years later, we have another family with waste coming up in their sump pump and in their backyard. Why? It wasn't dealt with right the first time. In addition to that, we've got Goodyear, we've got Griffin Park, we have Cayuga Island. We've got more that are about to come out, that you're about to hear about. And of course that makes me sad on one level, but on another level, I am hopeful because now things are going to change. Everybody's motivated. Nobody's taking no for an answer. We don't accept what DEC and EPA are telling us anymore. And what I'm really grateful for is the fact that all of a sudden we've got YouTubers and TikTokers and all of these mostly younger people who are demanding better. That is wonderful. So I'm applauding them. I'm going to provide them with documents. I think I have 10 million documents somewhere in all my drives. That's because there is a paper trail of what happened here. It's ugly. It's hard to piece together. I can't tell you how many times I drove to Albany or went to another city to try to find documents that had been removed from the state archives. The head archivist in Albany, who is amazing, actually told me that somebody has removed physically certain documents there that we needed. I tracked them down through Lois Gibbs. Okay? That's all coming to an end. We're entering an age of accountability, and I couldn't be more excited. So what I'd like to do, just point out a couple little pictures and things, and I thought I would read a passage from the book, and then I would love to entertain any questions or any discussion, because I know many of you have direct experience like I do. And, you know, I think it's time for us all to be able to talk about this. All right, so first, I wanted to show you what I've worked on. I can't take credit for this. Dr. Caitlin McShane, who is amazing, has been culling data, and I don't know how she builds software programs to do this, but I have this interactive database. This is one layer. You can pull up multiple layers where you can look for things by chemical, by address, where your address is. You can look at the percent of the acreage that's been contaminated, almost all of it. You can look at what was there, what company, and find all the documents. I want people all over the world to be able to have the tools to tell their story and also to be able to hold these companies accountable. Okay? So and I will go ahead and tell people how they can get to this through my website and ChristenCivilettoAuthor.com. You can get to these, not only the images, but the interactive thing itself. Let's see if I can zero in a little bit here. So what we did for each of these is you can click on it, you can see who is responsible, and you can dig up the documents if you choose. And we're now getting to the level where there's well data that you can look at, monitoring wells. And some of you may not know this, but throughout Western New York, but especially in Niagara Falls, we have hundreds and hundreds of wells that are constantly pumping these chemicals out of the ground. They're trying to capture them before they get to the Niagara River or move off site. It is a huge operation that is 24/7. So you can look at the monitoring data for many of these sites. Many of them have only been cleaned up to a certain level. They can't get to the bedrock contamination. So we've got a lot of chemicals still moving through the area. Some of them have never been remediated. And that's why you're hearing about them in the news right now. That's what Cuba Island is and a few other sites.
Can you point to 60th Street where you used to live on Devlin?
Yeah. Okay, so I can make this a little bigger, but there's the falls right there. 60th Street would be right where, hang on one sec, let me get my glasses here. Oh, I do have glasses over here. Maybe not. And I can make it bigger. There's Cuba Island, right there, and 60th would be right there. There's the 190. Here's 60th Street School, right in this area. And you can see where, just where the 190 is alone, these are really significant sites throughout. Hyde Park. There's the reservoir up there. There's the town of Niagara neighborhood that we're talking about with radiation right now. These are really big sites, these red ones right here. You can see Art Park, Stouffer Chemical was right there, that red dot. I'm rather astonished by Stouffer Chemical alone. they not only had Art Park covered, but they put their waste all over here. And I think we're finding it all along here as well. There's places right here that have 27 feet of fill. That is chemical contaminated fill. So they raised the ground 27 feet. It's mind-boggling. And of course, all along the Niagara River, this is Chemical Road, right over here. And we've got DuPont, Carborundum, Occidental. That's what we're looking at all along here. Those sites remain contaminated. There's some pretty significant stuff still under there. So I thought I'd show you just a couple of pictures, and then I'll read a passage, and then I would love to take any questions. These were of interest because these haven't really been seen before. This, and you'll have to come up and we'll put a light on. This is the same flagpole at a house on 96th Street over a couple years. And every year, some new chemicals show up. All of them are gross. So when you look at it, you'll see extremely suspect things. We tested this house. So did Niagara County. Niagara County went in there with what's called a PID meter to look for VOCs, volatile organic compounds. They found high numbers. That person, and this is secondhand, told the client that he went home and poured Clorox in his toilet, and he put the PID meter in there to see if he could get the same numbers, and he couldn't. Ridiculous. You know what they told that guy? We're not going to do anything further because we don't think it's really related to Love Canal. He's less than 900 feet from Love Canal. These are Love Canal chemicals, and when we tested his house, we came up with an entire suite of Love Canal chemicals. That's why this is exploding now. Over here, you'll see Love Canal chemicals surfacing in drains at 96th Street across from Love Canal. That's a picture of all my letters to EPA and DEC in 1 year with 300 pictures. And this one, only a few people have seen this to date. I believe that's the liner. We found it in 2 places. We tested it in 1. And what do you think it was? The composition of a liner. And the lab told us it was a liner. That's a little shocking. I tried to show this picture to the head of Region 2 EPA before Mike Martucci, the one before him. I tried to show it to DEC. They wouldn't even slow down to stop and talk to me. So a reckoning is coming. Here's the VOC testing that was done by Niagara County in that house. And you can see what it says, 4 to 6 ppm throughout the whole house. You don't want that. That's really bad. It should be 0. Okay. These boots are a person on 93rd Street. They're brand new. He left them in the basement. Their house was completely contaminated. We tested it. They evacuated for a year, moved back in, and he took them hunting. And as he put them on and went to walk, they came apart and disintegrated. It was unbelievable. So that's what that picture is. These are fish swimming into what we believe is a plume of chemicals from Love Canal, because what Niagara Falls has been doing is bypassing from a combined sewer to a storm only. So they have, I put pictures of it because nobody would believe this unless you see it. These are the bypass pumps, several of them. There it is. That plume is coming out at the outfall, and I have a video of fish swimming into it and dying as they encounter it. So here's the plume sitting right there, and there's 3 fish dead in a row. People watch the fish die. Okay. Here's the sewers. This is not a touched picture. This is actually what's in the sewers around Love Canal, and you can see it's a highly reflective blue material. Right here, if you got to come up close to see it, but you'll be able to see it. This one as well. So these were just a few pictures so you can see why Love Canal all of a sudden is jumping back into the news. We have a family on 99th Street, many of you probably know this, who were putting a pool in last month. And when they dug the pool out, lo and behold, all of this waste is right underneath their pool and all around their entire yard. They also have it inside. Now, testing reveals that it's two things going on. We've got extreme heavy metals, lead that's literally 24 times what you would want to see in a residence, and 154 times higher than what it should be under another standard. But inside the house, we have organic compounds from Love Canal. That's the plume that we believe is hitting these homes. So again, this is my thought. We're going to have to see what's going to shake out. It's quite alarming. In terms of some other pictures, let's see. We've got our poor little fish. That's a tree, and they kept breaking right at the bottom, not at the roots, but at the bottom of the tree. And when they opened up, we have lots of these pictures. Look at that inside. We sent it to Cornell Cooperative Extension. They were a little shocked because it doesn't look like any. And if you look at it up close, you'll see the same blue reflective material right there as here, here, and here. That's why it was a little surprising. So the bottom line is that Niagara Falls, I don't believe, has contended with its toxic legacy yet. I think we're still unearthing things, but more importantly, we have not really gotten to a point where EPA, DEC, the governor is paying attention. Now they're paying attention. So we're going to see some change, and I do believe history is being made. And I don't know how my book came out at the same time as all this. It's a little surprising. I'm sure it had some of the impetus there because people are now equipping themselves, which is what I always wanted. And I don't think this story just matters to Niagara Falls. I do believe this is a story that resonates throughout the world. First of all, we are a treasure, a beautiful, beautiful place that is significant spiritually, historically, for so many reasons. And we shouldn't be defiling it. But also because it's an injustice, what has occurred here. And you'll see in the book that I talk about many injustices, but here's the one I kind of want to leave off with, and then I'll just read a little portion. We're seeing astronomically high numbers of illness for people of color and for Indigenous people in Niagara County. There's a figure that is calculated, and it's called the lost years. And they actually count the number of years of a premature death in a given population. So for white people, the lost years might be 6,700 per 100,000 people. When you look at Black, Brown, and Indigenous, we're seeing numbers like 19,000, 20,000, 21,000 per 100,000 people. That's mind-blowing. And again, that's not just a Niagara Falls concern. The world should be concerned about that. So it's my hope that through this book, and maybe through people talking about it and researching for themselves, there are 100 pages of footnotes, and my publisher made me go down to 100 pages. It was 300 plus pages with explanations. But my hope is that we do something about this, because again, we don't let companies get away with this kind of defilement. And I'm not against capitalism and corporations doing their thing, but it needs to be ethical and it needs to be life affirming. And that's what my hope is with this book. I just want to read just a little passage if you'll allow me, and then I would love to take any questions. It is time to end the denial about the very real problems in Niagara Falls and other cities that have been destroyed by chemical companies. Until the root issue of contamination is addressed, no amount of revitalization, development plans, new hotels, reuse incentives, state programs, or federal assistance will help. This book attempts to shine a light on what has gone wrong and how we can begin to address it, all of it. It will not be easy. It will undoubtedly be uncomfortable. It will cost a lot of money. But perhaps just the acknowledgement of what happened here can ignite hope and a plan for a brighter future. But we can do even better than that. Read on. And I'm not going to tell you what happens at the end of the book, because I do think there's something more that we can do. And I'll tell you generally, I think we are due for some reparations. And I know that's a word that is fraught with a lot of meaning for a lot of people, but I do believe it is time to start to restore the area, the environment, and the people back to where we should be. So I had one other little section I thought I would read. I do talk a lot about DuPont because they were a major polluter. And in fact, has anyone ever heard of Necco Park? Anybody? Okay. So Necco Park is an area in Niagara Falls, right off of Niagara Falls Boulevard. It is one of the largest deposits of a chemical stew that we refer to as NAPL, non-aqueous phase liquid. So it's just a phase of how these chemicals move in the world. People came from Japan to study it, scientists, because nobody knew how NAPL really operated when it was moving and going into the ground. They were wrong about everything, by the way. So back in the 70s and 80s, when EPA was trying to figure out how does this stuff move, they were wrong. But they used Necco Park as one of the places to study because it was so contaminated. So DuPont. Today, the DuPont family wants to be known for horticulture and conservation, perhaps a fanciful fulfillment of their patriarch's vision of Pontiana, a utopian society that derived its wealth from the land. That's what they used to call themselves. The reality is that Pierre DuPont and members of his family oversaw the poisoning of the city. Their company, DuPont, targeted Niagara Falls for its operations and used our people, especially our immigrants, and resources to reap astronomical profits. It sullied our treasured Niagara River and the surrounding land and waterways. It poisoned our residents and our pets, and then it left. That family's wealth was earned on the backs of and at the expense of unsuspecting people, including my family and almost everyone else in Niagara Falls. And DuPont has never been accountable to the people of Niagara Falls. The emotional and the physical scars remain. I didn't know it at 40 years of age. That's where the chapter starts. While sitting around the table with my family. But within 2 years, I would lose my great aunts, my beloved Aunt Mary and others to cancer. My uncle was not spared from that insidious disease either. Multiple cousins, aunts, uncles, friends have since faced their own malignant diagnoses. It is forever harm, just like DuPont's forever chemicals. Alas, this is no Pontiana. So there was one company. We've got a lot of companies. And what I tried to do is give you a little bit in this book of the flavor of how they came into being, who's running these companies. There's another whole paragraph and section in the book that deals with Hooker Chemical. And when it was bought in 1968 by Occidental Petroleum, that company fell into the hands of one of the worst people imaginable, Armand Hammer. And I'll just leave you with a teaser. Not only was he a communist spy, a felon, an abuser of women, he also bragged about he used to have Al Gore Sr. in his back pocket. He tried to bribe 7 presidents. He thought he was a citizen diplomat and wanted to direct the affairs of the United States. This is the ego. He also thought he should have the Nobel Peace Prize. That's the hands that Niagara Falls fell into for a period of time. So I think you need that history, that background to understand fully what happened to us. But again, I hope it's hopeful because I do see change coming. So I'd love to hear some questions or comments from anybody.
I was wondering what your top recommendations for how we can get involved towards this cause and make a difference would
Yep,
be.
that's a great question. She asked how we can get involved, and I love that. First of all, educating yourself, because we've heard for too long from EPA and DEC that things are fine, things are under control. But then when you press them with specific questions, you don't get that same answer. So I think being educated about hazardous waste, radioactive waste, where does it go? Where does it go when it leaves here and goes over here? That's one thing. There's a group that started to form, Save Our Backyards Niagara, which is now, as of today, Save Our Backyards Western New York. And I'm very proud of these women. In particular, they have educated themselves, are standing up, we're holding meetings, we're learning how to be advocates, very key. I think awareness is really important. We have a lot of people who are very sick, but they don't make the connection with their environment. And so having that ability to possibly make a connection and press their medical care providers is really important. One of the pediatricians, the main pediatricians in Niagara Falls, worked for Occidental 1 day a week for decades. Every parent who brought their kid there who were being poisoned in the Love Canal area to the Summit pediatrician didn't know that he was on the payroll for Occidental. Okay? That's why you got to educate yourself, take control of your health. If you're not getting good answers, you need to go elsewhere. That's another way for you to get involved. Clean Air Coalition does excellent work. They are on it. They have a fantastic website. That's another excellent way to just be up to speed and volunteer with them. Those are just a couple ideas, but that's a great question. Anyone else? Yeah?
I don't know if you know, but yesterday on Grand Island, it's going to be also in Niagara Falls and Lewiston. They have DEC, EPA, and the health department. If you go there and tell them where you live, they will sample your soil. So I think Friday maybe it's going to be in Niagara Falls.
Yes.
And then Monday I believe it's going to be in the Lewiston Library. If you're interested in knowing.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. And if you do that, I want to give you just a couple little tips.
Mm-hmm.
You take pictures and video of everything they are doing.
Okay.
You make sure you take a picture of their equipment. You ask questions when you're getting your report. You make sure that you are on everything they are doing. Listen to what they're saying. We're picking up the most unbelievable comments on everybody's Ring cameras when DEC comes to their yard. So they're saying one thing when they're there. They caught on that everybody's got cameras now. And then what they're being told is something very different. So we'll catch on camera, oh wow, this is really hot. Yeah, move over there. And then when they talk to the homeowner, we didn't find anything really significant. So we started playing those videos for them. In fact, we did that today, and actually we got an apology. So be on them, okay? And you're right, you want to go to these things, get the testing, but now you got to ask the follow-up questions. Take pictures of everything.
I just happened to find them, yeah.
What's it?
I just happened to go there yesterday to the Welcome Center, and there they were.
Oh, they have a new command post. They're going to be here for at least 2 years. Yeah, we got a big problem unfolding. Yes.
So if I remember correctly, with regard to Love Canal, there was some money that was made available to the homeowners to move out.
So there's Love Canal 1. Is that what you're referring to? 1978 to 89?
I can't be that specific. Just that there was some money to help those people move out.
Yes.
And also, now that I'm thinking of it, a number of years later, those properties went back up for sale.
That's right.
So, but I guess what I'm asking, is there any money now to help people? I mean, as far as I remember, there was several people in particular, not particularly wealthy geographical area. So, I mean,
That's a
is there
great
any money to
question.
help those people move out? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm looking at all those areas up there. Is there any money available to help them move out of Niagara Falls completely?
Yeah, so the short answer is no. And the governor is, you probably have seen all her statements she's put out to us this week. She will not move the 99th Street family that's in the news every day. But what you're referring to is 1978, when Lois Gibbs was leading that charge, and also the black renters leaders, they settled and they received money both from the government to move, but also a settlement because they had litigation going against Occidental.
Settled with who?
They settled with Occidental, and I think there were 2 or 3 other defendants.
Oh, okay.
When I came along, we also sued Occidental, Niagara Falls, and a number of other people. That case got dismissed by a judge on a technicality after 14 years. So the
That
first
wasn't
case,
wasn't Judge Curtin, right?
that's a great question. So Judge Curtin is a federal judge. Our case for 14 years bounced between state and federal court and appeals courts. It was ridiculous. And Judge Curtin weighed in on the federal case, but it came back to state court, and Judge Civiletto dismissed it on a technicality of preemption. So your question is a good one. We have now Love Canal 3 unfolding this week. The governor has refused to relocate this family, even though not only have they had 5 miscarriages, they have a severely disabled child who can't get services because the service providers won't come into the house because it's contaminated. And she still won't relocate them. So we're about to go head to head with her this week. Great question though.
And I'm sure they're not even bothering with the federal government at this point.
The federal government said to us last week they cannot get involved until the governor requests it.
This is Lee Zeldin.
Lee Zeldin said he cannot until she says
Right.
the state has to ask for involvement, which is ridiculous because EPA is in charge of Love Canal. Doesn't make any sense. What else?
So on property, I'm following the situation that's happening now in the town of Niagara.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of reporting, some excellent reporting done by the Buffalo News by Mackenzie Schumann, who's
Yes.
an environmental reporter there. She's also reporting on remediation of the site, the Tonawanda site, which is interesting.
Yes.
When a brownfield is remediated, as happened with Love Canal, although no one's living there now, what is that process? Has the process evolved from 1978 to 2026? And how can people be sure it's safe? In the case of Love Canal, there was an attempt to remediate something, and then a developer moved in, bought the land, and put these attractive housing on it. But there are properties currently lived nearby that were similarly contaminated, that were not remediated or were inadequately remediated. How long does the remediation process take? I was interested in the reporter for the news, his coverage of the Tonawanda Cove site, that they're spreading 6 inches of clay over this toxic site, and then 3 inches of topsoil, and that's it.
Yeah, well, all right, let me speak to that, but I do want to show you what we're talking about because this will help greatly if I can just find a map. Here we go. Because that's a great question. So, all right, let's see if that pops up. Do you want to see if you can find it? Thank you. You want to just look up Colvin Boulevard, Niagara Falls, and see if you can just find it on a map. So, all right, I want to unpack what you just said. So, first of all, at Love Canal, the first time, all of those toxins were buried and barricaded. So 21,800 tons, and believe me, that is the most conservative, ridiculous estimate, because Hooker said, here's what we can remember. And we don't have any records from 1930 before that, and we don't have any from the 40s. Here's what we basically estimated. They weren't even close, okay? But let's go with 21,800 tons. That was barricaded. There's a partial clay top. There's a polyethylene liner, the high-density polyethylene liner that goes over the whole thing. That's the thin one, just a little thicker than a credit card. And then there are barrier drains that run around the perimeter. They hope that as it overflows, they can capture in the barrier drains any of these toxins, and then they send them to get remediated at the facility on site. If they don't capture it, where's it going? Nobody knows, okay? There's no routine monitoring at Love Canal at all, except groundwater wells. Unfortunately, the stuff that's in Love Canal is non-aqueous phase liquid. It doesn't go into a groundwater well when it migrates in that way. This is why they have missed it.
Who's in charge of monitoring?
The fox is guarding the hen house. Occidental subsidiary, Glen Springs. That's a great question. So, unfortunately, the chemical company is in charge of monitoring itself. your question is really good. Did people move back into the Love Canal area? Yes, they did. So here we go. Thank you very much. So here's Love Canal itself. There's the facility. The family right now that is in the news every single day, they live right here. I can't reach, but it's right there. Right there. I have tested all of these homes coming down, running down Lindbergh. 14 years, that's what we did, is 4 big rounds of testing. And here's what's interesting. Those pictures over there, there's a couple like with chemicals that you can see. Those were all taken here. Right here is where the sewer was opened up in 2011, and they found all kinds of Love Canal toxins. That's what started our case. Okay? That's right here. So here's, and you know, William Love started over here at the river, and he started in 1893 digging this out, and he ran out of money. So he left that canal there. My grandfather swam in it when it filled with water. And then Hooker came along in 1940s and said, wow, this looks like a really great place to put all of our hazardous waste, not even all, a portion. So they started filling it. There was already a school here. So 93rd Street School was already overlapping with their filling operations. And look at how close it was. That's the school. There's the baseball diamonds. There's the school. That's where they were dumping. Now, many of you probably know this. Down here is the 102nd Street monstrosity. So Love Canal is 21,800 tons, 159,000 tons. It's way bigger than Love Canal. Okay? If we go over here, 80,000 tons, 10,000 tons. It goes on and on. Up there, we've got Bloody Run, another 80,000 tons of the worst chemicals known to mankind. So, with your question about living, they resold those houses. So they evacuated the EDA 4 up there. Here's the emergency declaration area. They raised these houses, but they repopulated that, and they repopulated these. This is the end of the EDA. So I've represented these families all over here, all up there, and that's the one who said, you didn't clean. You sold us this house and told us it was clean. It's not. Okay, so we've got EPA representatives who are telling people, safest place to be on the planet. These are exact words. Most tested place on the planet. They should never have been sold. That's kind of going to your point. So you're going to see this unfold this week. We're starting to release today documents showing that they forgot that lot for sure, and probably others. Any questions? Go ahead.
So if there's Love Canal chemicals in the sewer, going back to that 2011 episode,
Yeah.
it's fair to say that these chemicals are moving through the sewer system to other neighborhoods, right?
So the official report concluded, I've been dealing with this one all day today. The official report said, oops, that was isolated and pre-existing because we had a low sewer, and we must have forgotten that in the 1980s during the cleanup. However, I've interviewed 3 of the guys who were in that trench, and they said it was a river of Napple. So when you read the report, it doesn't talk about a river, it says little isolated and pre-existing. That's about to come out too, because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I've got engineer field reports who saw Napple coming into the trench from here.
Isn't there that satellite imagery from early on that shows the dying grass too?
Yeah, you can see you're right. You can see actually a pathway on some satellite images where it was going from here to here. It was all dead. I think there's a breach here too, right there, because this is where we always are finding chemicals here. You can see pictures, I have right up on there. Go ahead.
What do you think reparations looks like in practice?
Corporate, multi-billion-dollar companies who reaped lots of profits from here need to start a fund that goes towards research, medical assessments, testing, and I I can go on from there, but it starts with that. Because here's what I keep running into. Not only do we have doctors who are not equipped for chemical exposure, they don't know what to do with it. So my clients bring their test results to their doctors, and their doctors are like, I'm not a scientist. And it's this dead end for them. They then call county health, which is the worst dead end on the planet. They then call state health, who says there's no problem, it's functioning as intended. So it's this dead end. Those reparations need to go to equipped doctors who are ready to assess these kinds of exposures. So for example, my clients right now are getting tested for thorium because that stays in your blood. And most doctors cannot do that. So that's where these reparations come in. One place. Research, we know there's some really serious things that are whacked out number-wise in Niagara County and Niagara Falls in particular. Now we gotta figure out why. So if the suicide rate is twice the state average, we need to figure out why. Right? I could go on about that subject. That's a great question though. There is precedent for with this. There are other times in history where reparations were given generally for various reasons. But here's the reason why I think it works here. At the end of my book, I have quotes from Armand Hammer and Bruce Davis. Bruce Davis was the face of Hooker when everything was going on with Love Canal. When they didn't want to be sued, they were saying, we don't have legal liability, we do have moral liability. Okay, well now that you don't have legal liability, we're going to go back to your moral liability and we're going to hold you accountable because of your moral duty. And if you read the end of the book, it's quite a statement they make. We have a moral duty to fix, what we did in this city. Yes, you do. So we're going to hold you to it. Anyone else? My glasses have disappeared. So thank you.
The chair.
When I teach my poor students, they're like, I don't see it.
I'm a teacher in the same school. Can you, because you've been so kindly putting up with my messages, you spoke about the DEC, the EPA, the runaround, the dead end, the ridiculousness of that. I have been struggling with that since July 23rd, and I was going to bring this up again privately, but then I thought maybe some people here could benefit from my just nightmare experience that won't end. Those EPA and DEC drop-in sessions, I think, are just to say we dropped in. It's paid bad actors sitting at tables. I wish the Bills Mafia could show up and do something with those tables. And I swear they're just reading from a script that says we are still collecting data. And they will tell you that over and over again. Or the thing that I get commonly, I'm talking, I call 3 times a day. And it's somebody different, but they're all saying the same thing. It's we're still collecting data, and also the most common quote is that I don't know what the last person told you, but this is what I can tell you. And it's as if that whole hour conversation the day before never happened.
Correct.
And it won't end. And now I've got, and you're talking about video recording, I got 22 minutes of some really great video that I know some reporters would love to share. And we were talking about, you took some of that and showed it. How do you make it end? And it just won't end for me. Friday, second crew showed up because I've been told 5 different things about what happened to the first set of data, which supposedly was in the mail as of Wednesday of last week. And that was mailed locally. Well, it should be at my house by now, right? It was Tuesday. I was told it was possibly lost. I was told there was equipment failure, all kinds of other things. They're still looking at it. I was told on a Monday that it was lost, and then on Tuesday I got a call saying, based on your data, we need to come in and do some soil sampling now. Well, if you lost it the day before, suddenly you found it. And it's just, that never happened. And then it's always, we'll call you back to schedule. Well, both times that crews showed up, they didn't call. Actually, 3 crews have now showed up. one I sent away.
Okay.
I had a 12-minute argument, and I told him, get off my property, you're trespassing. Where's my data from July 23rd? So another crew came back on Friday. I've got it on video. The end of the video, we do this again. The young girl couldn't figure out if she lost my data, standing right on my yard after she walked it again. Couldn't figure out if she saved it. She asked another person on the crew, and he just laughs and he goes, well, I don't want to push something and make it go poosh. I guess poosh is a technical term now.
So I would recommend that.
It's not ending.
I'm going to show you like picture over
So
here.
I'm sorry, but you know.
See these letters? This is
Yes.
what you do. Every time you interact with DEC, EPA, or anyone, you want to send a follow-up confirmatory letter. Thank you for your time. Here's what we discussed, and establish with them each time when you're going to hear back from them, and then confirm that in the letter as well. You want to have, lock everybody down. You're recording everything. That's really key, like you've been doing. And then once in a while, we've been seeing where they're giving their phone numbers and their, cell phone out.
Right.
You start there now forever, and you only go higher. Okay, so going to the next person's supervisor is how you should be dealing with everybody going forward.
Yeah.
And you are following up with calls, you've got to be a squeaky wheel, but it's really important that you are remembering who you talk to, mentioning that to the next person, and you keep going higher. I only call the commissioner now. I won't deal with anybody.
Yeah, I think that's the run to the point, because I am,
Oh, yeah.
and with all due respect, I have been going to the next person. What I was told by the supervisor I talked to on Friday was that they're rotating in 2-week shifts. So people that'll get super invested in your situation,
Right.
and you're talking to and you're working with, I don't know if this is made up, if it's true or not.
Yeah.
But then they say, because she told me that on Friday when she sent the new crew out, she said she was only going to be on, going to be continuing her shift until Monday, and now she's gone.
You know what to do?
So,
Why don't you contact me offline,
okay.
and I'll help you with a couple other strategies, but you're doing everything right.
Thank you. I just wanted to share this because I didn't
Yeah.
want to, because
No, you're on the right
I see
track.
Other people are going through it, and and then another question is totally up to you. I don't want to take it off track here, but then I went independent too, testing. So
Absolutely.
that was.
I highly recommend that. If you have the means, getting your own testing done is always wise, but get some input first. Call somebody like me or another activist who's volunteering their time and get some help, because you don't want to waste your money. Okay? And there's reputable people out there and maybe not so reputable people, but get your own testing is not a bad idea. We've got people right now who have these boreholes in their yard, and they're filling up with red brown liquid, and they're trying to take their own samples, and then they got sick. So you don't want to do that. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yesterday when I was there, they had a reporter from, I can't remember which channel news, but
Hi, Nate.
so it might be when you go Friday or Monday,
Yes.
there may be a reporter or a police.
Yeah, I talk to the
Great
reporters.
idea.
I talk to the reporters like every day.
Yeah,
No,
so there
that's
might
an
be-
excellent idea. You're holding
Yeah,
people
no, you're
accountable.
right. You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
So, not an answer, but your thoughts on this. Thank you for this book, the presentation, the time, and what you just said, Clean Air Coalition. So, March of 2020, just before the pandemic happened, Sierra Club was going to show the film Dark Waters at the Historic Museum. And then because of the pandemic, they weren't able to do that. But that's been based on, it's Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Yes.
So then I just finished the book, They Poisoned the World, which is
Yes.
about Hoosier Falls,
Excellent.
outside of Albany. And here we are, decades,
Yes.
century of this. The isolation, Hoosier Falls, Parkersburg, here, the voices. How do we build that in 2026 so that we have, because absolutely, Waste Wars, another book, international. How do we, but let's take it down to New York State, just Hoosick Falls and Niagara Falls.
Yes.
Any thoughts about how, and of course you've been in touch with, so many people, but publicly build that so it's not like, oh, DEC, EPA, okay, no, it's all okay. And the same thing in Hoosick Falls in West Virginia. Thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I love the word that you use, build, because that's exactly what you do. You build on the momentum that is building right now. And I do see this as a fourth wave of activism in Niagara Falls. When you read the book, you'll find out that a bunch of women brought lawsuits in 1906, about acre process, and there's a picture of acre operating. It was a very, very big polluter, but not even the biggest. And they sued. They won. They didn't collect their money necessarily because they went bankrupt and the place burned down. But we then saw in 1968, a group of housewives from the Evershed area decided to take on Mayor Lackey. There's a huge showdown that is detailed in the book. Love Canal, Lois Gibbs and the Black Renters Association with the 4 women there, they rose up. Now we're having that again. And what's different this time is social media, because now the world is watching. And I really feel like the world's eyes are on Niagara Falls, or will be in the next few weeks. I will share that we've got some national stuff about to happen. I can't share anymore. The world's eyes are on us. And it's happening. Now we're better equipped. Rich?
I just want to add to that. We're actually coming up on the 50th anniversary of like Lois Gibbs and Lyle Canyon, like all the activism that happened like the 1970s and early 80s. So this was already there's going to be some narrative internationally about Love Canal, just with that anniversary, and now all this is hitting the news as well. So yeah, this is we're starting to see a very big moment.
I also think something big is about to happen, because some of my former clients are getting ready to release their testing data from their house. Everybody's scared, right? And we had a judge who was scary. I'm gonna say it. Not for the camera back there. I just kind of noticed me back there. But now people are motivated because they think they're going to be believed. Because when they got shut down in litigation, that was very disaffirming, and they didn't think they would ever be believed. And now they've got pictures, testing data. That's why I'm allowed to use these, because they said, let's go. This is going to be different. You can't go back to normal after what has been transpiring for the past 2 months in Niagara Falls. That's a great point. Good. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you so much. I welcome questions. Of course, we would love it if you bought the book, because Talking Leaves is amazing, and they are a Buffalo institution. I'm very grateful for you. And I would love to answer any questions, pictures. I only brought a little smattering of what I have, but I thought this would be kind of whet your appetite, because there's a lot more that's about to come out. And I can't wait. It's time. So thank you, everyone. Have a nice night.